Our Wednesday morning, July 6, 2022 budget hearings. Just a reminder for anybody who might be joining us online for the first time. We don't take any public comment during our budget hearings. It's just an opportunity for community partners and commissioners to discuss things in the budget, but folks are welcome to reach out to us individually or make public comment at our business meeting.
Thanks, commissioners. Can you hear me all right? Suzanne, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? I've got a different microphone. Okay, cool. And it's really bothering me. We're going to start this morning with our justice partners. I thought we would start with the district attorney this morning, and because I know we're waiting on the court's administrator. So if we could, thought we'd start with you, Suzanne. If you want to just talk briefly about your supplemental requests and maybe introduce your staff that's with us, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to appear by Zoom. I've been under the weather for like 3 or 4 days, and I've had 3 COVID tests, all negative, but I didn't want to show up and spread my germs around. So I'm hunkered down in my office here. And Stephanie Kinsley's also with me. Stephanie has been very instrumental in putting together our proposal and has joined me today. So 2 supplemental requests. The first being an added line for legal assistance, meaning outside counsel to assist the DA's office with various questions that are really kind of ancillary to our work as prosecutors. There's this idea that because we're lawyers that we know everything and we can figure out a legal problem, and the answer may be that we can, except that when we're faced with questions that are outside of our core prosecution function, it takes time away from our casework. And certainly we don't have the expertise to get, to kind of do the work. And I'll just kind of give you some ideas of why this is necessary. In the past, the county administrator has been very generous and still is generous with allowing, if we've got a sort of a very strange legal question, usually it's an employment question or something that we need help with, we're able to use the counsel for the county. And this has kind of set up some conflicts. So then we're left trying to scramble, trying to get assistance, and again, taking away from our core prosecution function just the time that we have to answer these questions. And let me just give you an example of these areas that we're needing help with. There are really 3 areas. One is since I became, I started as DA, I've been working on a lot of internal and external policies that just really didn't exist prior to me coming to the DA's office. And we want to do it in an ethical, constitutional, and transparent manner. Some of these policies, for example, the Brady-Giglio policy, which relates to our obligation to divulge and disclose impeachment material related to law enforcement personnel, has caused some challenges. And I think it's because of the fact that this writ policy didn't exist before. We are working through all of that, and eventually I think we're going to get to a place where we are working forward on and working off a policy that will work and meets our constitutional obligation. But it is this type of example where we've had to spend a lot of time trying to delve into the issue, get some advice, and I think it's much needed sort of help with legal advice would be necessary, and I believe is necessary. The third, so that's just one example, and there are other examples of where we've had to just really dig down on some policies to make sure that we were doing and handling our policies in a way that made sense. The second big issue that we faced is, as we all know, being a law enforcement officer, being a prosecutor is, it's not a very sexy job these days, hasn't been for a few years. It's very difficult sometimes when we have frivolous ethics complaints filed against prosecutors. We're seeing a high uptick of that, but that's actually across the country, in Kansas as well. I just spoke with my counterpart in Sedgwick County, Mark Bennett, and he has seen an uptick in just these complaints being filed. More often than not, they're frivolous, but we still have to respond to them. Sometimes it takes a day or 2 days for the prosecutor to gather all of the information, to form a response, and it just takes time from our core work that we're supposed to be doing in our office. The other thing that we've seen is that it really hurts morale because that particular prosecutor has to defend a complaint, again, that may be frivolous, and morale tends to take a hit. And then lastly, we get lots of core requests, and I think we're seeing more of those in light of the fact that we have more policies and trying to make sure that we're putting those out on our website and we're trying to be transparent. So sometimes we get some gnarly questions on core requests, and so we would need some help with that as well. So just asking for that. I don't know if we'll use it, but if we do need it, we'd like to have our own independent counsel to provide assistance with all of these, as I've described them, ancillary matters, so that we can focus on our core prosecution function in our office. So that's the first request. The second request relates to an added assistant district attorney position and a trial assistant position once the new district judge joins the court. We were just in a bench bar meeting a few days ago, I think on Friday of last week, and it's unclear, maybe the court administrator will have more information on this, but if this division starts up and starts business, we will need a prosecutor and a trial assistant to manage the docket of the court. It's not clear whether we're going to have that judge is going to do civil work or whether they're going to do some criminal work. We don't know. And I don't think that determination can be made until that individual is brought on board. And Judge McCabery indicated that the judges will then decide how the assignments will be made. However, we're going to still have the same amount of criminal cases we're moving through in our office. Even though the number of cases will remain the same, we still have to staff a division with a prosecutor devoted to that particular judge and a trial assistant. So I believe that my request did kind of clarify that. We just will be moving cases more quickly through the courts, but we're going to have additional personnel to provide the prosecution team, if you will, for any criminal work that particular judge will handle. So that's really the two requests that we've made. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I do want to thank you again for the approval of our case management system last December. Wanted to give you an update that we're moving that process and installation along. We hope to have it up and running by October of this year. That's going to be very, very helpful with all the work that we're doing in our office. And we're very excited about that system. So thank you again for that. And I think that is it.
Thank you, DA Valdez. Any questions from commissioners?
This is Commissioner Portillo. I just would love to hear a bit more information about this request for external legal counsel. My understanding is that our county counsel can provide support when there are issues that have to do with things that are representing the county. I'm wondering why we might need to provide additional legal counsel for the district attorney's office in particular. And I hear what you're saying about an increase in ethical complaints kind of nationwide. Could you give us an update on, have we seen any of these ethical complaints substantiated? Where are they at in the process? What does that process look like? Are these against the office for things that are based on county practices, or are they about individuals within the office? Just help me understand what we're looking at here.
Well, to your first question about the county council, like I indicated, the county administrator has been very gracious in allowing us to use counsel whenever we need it, but there have been conflicts that are inherent in our ethical framework that prevent sometimes the county council from assisting us, and we're seeing more of that lately. So we need our own independent counsel. The sheriff's department has their own independent counsel. I don't see why the DA's office would not have their own independent counsel. Again, I think the idea that just because we're lawyers that we can somehow figure all this out, and we can, except that it takes time away from our core function, which is to prosecute our cases and of course work in our alternative programs. It takes manpower. We're not, what we know is our work, which is the prosecution and criminal justice system. It's very difficult to be answering and responding to questions that we really, employment questions. For example, I had a question about a military personnel related to who's on, we have an ADA who's on leave, and we need to know kind of what kind of guarantee for a job position do we need to provide him under federal law? I don't even know where to begin to research any of that. So I contacted the county counselor and he said he couldn't help me because of a conflict of interest. So these are things that if we have to do that research, we're not doing the work of our core prosecution function, which I did submit to the county commission, our roster, to give you a sense of how all our prosecutors are assigned. So we have division attorneys, depending on the criminal docket. We've got a felony, prosecutor. We've got misdemeanor prosecutor, just depending on the volume. So that is, that's been sent to you all so that you know how where our work is focused. I, as the DA, my focus is on sexual violence. Those cases take a lot of time because we take on our prosecution of those cases in a victim-centered way. So time intensive, those kinds of things. So we just need someone that we can call up, and it's not to say that we would use the entire budget, but we do need someone who can give us some advice about employment issues, et cetera. To your question about the ethics piece of it, the attorney ethics, we are regulated by the Office of the Disciplinary Administrator. And so anyone can file a complaint against an attorney. Anyone can do it. And what will happen typically is that complaint is docketed or it's reviewed, and then the disciplinary administrator will ask for a response. So we have to take time out to respond to whatever complaint it is. 9 times out of 10, these are frivolous. Sometimes it's something that related to a victim wasn't happy or a defendant wasn't happy with something, but we have to pull the record. We have to take we've got to get a transcript. We've got to write a response. We've got to look at the case file. We've got to do all of this in order to present a defense. It takes time. The last complaint that one of my prosecutors had took him 2 days to get through it. Not only was he frustrated by the complaint, it was frivolous, and it hurt his morale. I mean, we're in a situation right now where it's hard to get prosecutors. We're not paying them very well, and certainly it's a tough space. So I would appreciate being able to, once that complaint comes in, give it to counsel, say, here's the complaint. Here's the file, can you write a response? And that particular ADA does not have to take the time from their core function to respond. That attorney can do it for them, and morale, it's really a morale booster. So in terms of complaints, we're seeing an upward tick nationally. That's been going on since around 2020. And so people use it. It can be used to weaponize, just whatever it is prosecutors are doing in the office. And again, it's a process that is legitimate because it serves a legitimate purpose, but it can also be something that takes up a lot of time. They're often frivolous, and we still have to respond to those complaints. So we would appreciate some assistance with that. And I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Just 2 additional questions, one for Sarah and then one for you, District Attorney Valdez. Sarah, can you help me understand the relationship between HR for the county and then how that interacts with the district attorney's office, particularly around employment pieces? I know all the district attorney job openings are listed on the county website, things like that. And then the second one, District Attorney Valdez, you mentioned that 9 out of 10 times these are seen as frivolous complaints. Was that something that's coming out of your office, or do you have numbers on what we're seeing as far as frivolous and substantiated for the office currently?
Related to the first question, what I'd say is that we work cooperatively with all of the elected officials and appointed folks in terms of how we process HR. job postings, and if there's things that we can do to assist, we work cooperatively. There are some, but it's probably important to note that the employees of the district attorney's office report to the district attorney. They have different rights and responsibilities and powers through the attorney general's office. So, if we can help with administrative and clerical items, we certainly do. Obviously their payroll is all processed and their benefits are all processed through the county, but they are employees of the district attorney in terms of that decision-making. She doesn't need any sort of, I don't vet those decisions. If she were to make a hiring or a firing decision, those don't come through me. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I'd also say that related to outside counsel, we've used, so that it works similarly. If there's not a conflict, county council has worked for elected officials for routine matters where there would not be a conflict between the county commission and or that elected official. There's special case law that allows for that. The sheriff's office has used that in that situation when they need specialized counsel. There are pieces of counsel that are attorney work for the sheriff that also have run through county council. What we've come into recently is just there's been a kind of a state of some cases and some questions that might put the county commission and or the county administration in conflict. So it's just from an attorney perspective, it's important that John Bullock as county counsel be available to you as county counsel, and that is the top priority over general assistance on an Open Records Act request, for example. Did that help and make sense? All right.
This Commissioner Reed, I just want to, Sarah asked a follow-up question to that. Well, I heard DA Valdez mention that the sheriff has legal counsel for the sheriff's department. Is that accurate, that they have their own, or that they go through us unless there is a conflict, in which case they may find other counsel?
So the counsel that the sheriff's office uses is through the firm of Stevens and Brand, where county counsel is, our county counsel, John Bullock, is there, and they have assigned Leslie Miller as his chief counsel for the sheriff. She responds more specifically on questions related to law enforcement issues, law enforcement liability, rights of inmates and so forth. She just has more expertise on that issue than, say, John Bullock. If there were ever a situation where there would be a conflict between the sheriff and the county in terms of that conflict, we would either have to go through a conflict waiver process or find other counsel. And it just to note, while we're talking about all kinds of counsel, the county oftentimes, because we are fully insured for professional liability, we've also used Fisher Patterson for litigation work as well. So sometimes we've decided that there's been a conflict at Stevens and Brand, and the county uses outside counsel for litigation.
Thank you.
So related to your question about substantiated complaints, we haven't had any of those, but that's really the point of this, is that we have to respond to them, to every single one of those complaints. And that's what takes time. And I've already kind of made my point about the time, effort, and certainly the morale piece of it.
DA Valdez, is Patrick Kelly. So you mentioned that you talked to Sedgwick's DA. Did they have outside counsel? And then just sort of a secondary question to that, what role does the Attorney General play in supporting district attorneys in Kansas when it comes to ethics complaints?
No, that's a good question. So Sedgwick County has got their office is probably 3 times the size of our office, and they've got their own ethics person who handles all of their conflicts, handles all of their ethics complaints. And when I talked to Mark Bennett, he indicated that the uptick in, he had seen the uptick in these complaints filed against prosecutors. And so that's how he responds to them. And for the reasons that I indicated to you in terms of morale and prosecution function, all of that. But they have a line for basically an ethics prosecutor. I mean, that's the other option that we could go to. I don't think we need that, but they essentially, when there's a complaint filed, it goes to the attorney who handles our ethics complaints. He writes the response. This is what he does as a matter of course, and he's pretty much an expert in it. And in fact, he presents a lot of our ethics CLEs to the state organization. He's that specialized. And then he addresses the complaint and gets it over to the ODA, which is the Office of the Disciplinary Administrator. But keep in mind that it is a larger office. So for purposes of your question about the Attorney General does represent will represent me, but will not represent my office, my rank and, my line prosecutors.
DA Valdez, this is Commissioner Reed. I want to ask about your other request for additional attorney and trial assistant for the new Division 7 courtroom that we will have. Well, I heard you acknowledge in your explanation that there's still a lot of unknowns about that, including timeline process, right? To be fair. So as I'm curious to know, if we were to get a new division judge and they were to be civil only, which has happened a number of times in the past decade or so of many new judges, folks who came out of the district attorney's office and were not given any sort of criminal dockets for a number of years in order to avoid conflicts and so on. Whatever the judge's specialty has been in certainly helps determine kind of what dockets they'll be assigned. So I guess it's a little bit more of a comment, but also I'm curious if you feel like there's, well, I appreciate that you acknowledged earlier that the number of cases is under your control, right? The number of cases that your office is prosecuting won't increase because of a new judge. There's theoretically could be spread out further, but we don't really know that yet, right? And so I suppose I just want to hear from you if you believe the only reason to request another prosecutor and another trial assistant is because you believe that there will be another courtroom that your office needs to respond to? Or is there other capacity?
Yeah, no, I
issues?
think I can clarify. So you're right. If it's a completely civil docket, then we don't need either of those two positions, right? So the way the criminal dockets work in Douglas County is all the judges who do criminal work have dockets and essentially a prosecutor or two assigned to them to move the cases. And with the submission that I provided you with our organizational chart, I hope that gives a little bit of sense of how this works. We also have our specialty courts. Jim Carpenter's our guy for that, so that's not going to change. This just assumes, I just want to make sure I put it in there in case in the event, and again, we don't know because for the reasons I've already explained, it may be a completely civil docket, in which case we'll just stay with our judges, and we'll just keep moving cases along that way. The minute you involve an extra judge, then the caseload will remain the same, right? But the cases will move through a lot quicker, and you'll have a judge that will want an assigned prosecutor and trial assistant to move the cases. So it's just a matter of manpower. So I guess it's very low priority at this point because we don't know, but in the event that it happens and we end up with the criminal docket, it'll be something we'll be scrambling to, it's almost going to be impossible for us to cover a criminal docket with a new judge in light of all the time that's devoted to our current judges and their criminal dockets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I appreciate that response. And certainly there will be lots of juggling and logistics to figure out, but there are a lot of steps that have to happen in the process first. And once we know who that judge is, we have a number of things to determine. But I hope and feel confident that ongoing conversations between the district court and your office will continue to figure out how to how to make capacity work and figure out what gaps might exist in the future in the future of the courts once we have that determined. So any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Kelly. I took note of your comment that we don't pay our staff there at the DA's office very well. And I seem to recall that, and I'm just asking to refresh my memory and the public's memory, there was some reorganization that was done with the number of attorneys and pay a while back. Am I remembering that correctly? The number of attorneys, we reduced the number of attorneys in your office and increased their pay. Am I remembering that correctly or incorrectly?
I think what you're getting at, Commissioner, is I took an entry-level ADA position and I chopped it up in order to raise the salaries of my current prosecutors.
Suzanne, you're frozen on us. Can you? Stephanie, can you maybe see if she needs any assistance to she may have to log back in or log back out. Oh, looks like you're back. You were
Okay.
frozen on us for a minute.
Yeah, it
there.
says my internet connection is unstable, but okay. So I think, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so Commissioner Kelly, I think what you were, I'm not sure when I got, when I was frozen on the screen here. But we were at a point where we were losing prosecutors to pay in Johnson County. We were also losing pay to just anyone who was going into prosecution. And so in order for me to make our, keep our wages competitive, I took and another point I wanted to make was the Kansas Holistic Defenders were getting paid. Their salary was actually higher than 3 of my ADAs, which caused a lot of consternation within my younger group of personnel. So I felt like I needed to, based on their experience, the work that they were doing, many of them were covering felony work, that their salaries needed to be increased. So what I did is I took an attorney line and I chopped it up so that I could give everyone a boost in their pay, everyone except me, so that we could keep morale high, and certainly to get those 3 ADAs at a position that many of them had lots of experience, certainly relative to our older, more experienced attorneys, but that's kind of how I took that line. I chopped it up. That doesn't mean the work's still here. We're still moving it along. We've got a good crew of people, but if that's your question, I think that's the answer to the question. So essentially taking a line and chopping it up so that we can increase wages to make them competitive and we wouldn't lose very seasoned attorneys. I just want to point out too, that we've got 3 lawyers in this office who handle a lot of the gun violence cases. We have those that are doing sex assault cases that are very important to this community. Without seasoned prosecutors doing this work, I'm in a world of hurt. So I wanted to make sure that I kept those people. And I felt like doing that was the right thing to do to keep morale high and to be competitive with our other prosecution offices around this community, around Douglas County.
Yeah, my question was just to sort of understand the authority you have as the DA to sort of reorganize and assign staff as necessary. Back to the question I had on the ethics complaints, how you organize that is really up to you. And so I just wanted to get some more clarity on, as you're asking for more staffing, to understand how you would use staffing in the past.
Well, and I think I just want to be clear. I'm asking for, when I say, I guess, staffing, only if we get a 7th division. That's the staffing request. That's separate than the, having a line if we need to get legal advice or someone that may need to jump in on an ethics complaint, which again, there are not very many of them, but they do come in. So it's just one of those kinds of, counsel that we could use to help take care of that so that we can focus on our work. And then again, just doing some deep dives on some issues that, like I said, probably the best example was just this military question about if someone goes on leave and then their leave is extended, how does that affect my ability to hire someone in my office? So those are just things that if I had someone that I could just say, hey, I have this legal issue, help me with this. They're ancillary to our core prosecution function. So it's really more of a fund, if you will, if we need it. So I guess I'd see the distinction in those two requests.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Sarah, was the district attorney's office included in the market merit study that we recently had?
Yes. The compensation analysis, the DA's office was included in that. That's really talking though about minimum wage minimums and of ranges. And what I think part of the complexity with the DA's office is, and then it's going to make compression adjustments for folks that are going to be compressed at the bottom of those ranges. Well, a lot of her staff are very new. So, and those compression adjustments are going to be moved based off of tenure in the position. So many of them are not going to receive compensation adjustments from that approach because of the methodology we used to develop the comp study. I do want to say that, it's very unusual for us to take a position and chop it up to give pay in the manner that was done in the district attorney's office. So if I've got department heads listening, please don't take notes. We don't do that very often around here. It was done in this situation largely as a reflection of the fact that the district attorney is an independent elected official and can manage her own budget the way she sees fit. And then also because from a compensation analysis perspective, they likely will not get much of an adjustment except for maybe some of her trial assistants who've been here a while and at the lower levels. I anticipate some of that staff might still receive compensation adjustments. Again, I do want to say we have budgeted for the district attorney's office to receive the 3.4% market-based merit pool and a 4% merit pool for 2023. That is included in the budget for the district attorney.
I just wanted to just also thank Sarah for, and at any time before I made the decision to chop up the line, I did talk to her. I wanted to see whether it was possible. So I do confer with Sarah. I certainly don't want to be an outlier. I want to be part of, even though I'm an elected official and I think, I have the discretion to use my budget as I am given it. I do want to make sure that I'm a team player. I do want to make sure that we're doing things that are appropriate. And so we really reached a point, and I think we're kind of past that point now, where literally there was just all kinds of pirating going on. From Wyandotte County to Johnson County, people taking and offering just exorbitant amounts of wages. I'm losing actually a senior ADA to Garden City, so Finney County, $120,000. And there's no way I can match it. So these are things, this is he's been planning to leave for a while. Finney County is his home county. So that's where he's going to go back and be a part of that community, which I think is perfect for him. But when I'm paying that individual $85,000 and he comes in and says Finney County is going to pay me $120,000, I'm not even close to matching that. So that was probably about 6 weeks ago when that conversation happened. I think things are maybe calming down here, but it really is I guess a buyer's market. And we're doing what we can to keep our very seasoned and experienced prosecutors here in Douglas County and doing the work that we need them to do.
Suzanne, can you tell us how many vacancies you currently have?
Right now I have a senior position open. So I am in the process of trying to get that wrapped up. I have an individual in mind, but again, I'm running against a salary issue. She's a very experienced prosecutor out of Missouri and has done some Kansas work. I know her. She's a known quantity, but I'm not even sure I can afford her. So we have one senior position open. Other than that, we're fully staffed. I believe we've got a trial assistant position open that we're interviewing for and maybe a receptionist, but that's about it. And we're pretty steady, have been pretty steady for the last few months.
Thank you, DA Valdez. Any questions from other commissioners? Okay, I think we're done with questions. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Shall
Now I see the courts administrators joined us. I don't know if you want to do the district court.
Sure, let's jump into district court.
Okay. Come on up. You can sit here, and then we'll probably have to share a mic. Okay. Got it. Just commissioners, this is an opportunity just to review the district court budget. The biggest issue is a supplemental request. It was both an Arpa supplemental request and then a general budget request related to the creation of a self-help center. So I just don't know, Linda, the commissioners have the packets. You get a copy of the packet. Okay, Commissioner Portillo. But I don't know if we just really haven't had a whole lot of time to discuss this with the commission. So I just don't know if you want to provide it. You said you had a PowerPoint or? Yep, I'll do that. Yeah. You have to talk in the mic.
Sorry, it's just a summary of what you see in the book or the handout, the pamphlets. Just trying to give you an overview of years that we've been working on self-help. I guess I could try and go ahead and start discussing.
Yeah.
Give you a little bit of background. So I did just kind of an overview to tell you that the court had been looking, and the judge obviously is the wealth of information. And so it's like having encyclopedia right beside me. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask him. I'm sure he's glad that I would volunteer him. But we knew that we had individuals who came to the court who were looking for help. Our court personnel are prohibited by rules, obviously very logical rules, since the courts are an impartial body, from giving legal advice. And it's really hard for the public to understand what's legal advice and what's not legal advice. And so they try to continuously reposition their question. No, I don't want legal advice. What I want to know is, should I file this and what should I put on that form? Like, again, and so it's been difficult in a sense to try to give them the help that they need. We obviously refer them to the services that are available, whether it's legal aid, Kansas Legal Services, and any other resource. And we do suggest attorneys, but usually if they're calling us, it's because they can't afford counsel. And then fortunately, the Kansas Supreme Court has a rule that allows attorneys to provide services where they haven't formed a client relationship with individuals when they are working through a not-for-profit or a court program. So obviously when we were talking to the judges, Judge McCabery directed us, he wanted to know, well, what's the scope of this problem? What are we talking about? And so we asked every entity that had intersection or contact with public to try to come up with what are the questions that come in not only on a daily basis, but if not daily, multiple times daily or weekly. And I myself on weekends, I get emails constantly of people saying, you know, my sister just died. I need to do something with her car. What do I do? Again, people looking for help. And so if you look on the third, I think it's, I don't have the tabs to tabulate, I'll just go by the overview, but it's on Appendix C. There was a wealth of questions that are commonly asked. And I think, and I don't want to speak for the judge, but I think even the judges were a little bit surprised about the great demand that was out there from not only for their AAs, but for our court clerk's office and for our court trustee office, who try to serve the public as best we can, but obviously we have our prohibitions. And we did a lot of research trying to look at what is happening in the rest of the community, not only in our state, but in other states. And you can see unfortunately, low-income households experience a significant amount of intersection with the justice system. And it may start with one thing, and then usually we find out that it ends up that they end up with maybe 5 or 6. And trying to help them navigate, because then it becomes a very onerous piece for them. Anyway, as you can see, that it looks like for all of us that it's women, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. So again, it's important to us to try to meet these needs. Do you mind switching it to the next? Thank you. So we tried to come up with a timeline, not knowing what kind of funding we were going to be able to secure. We actually asked the state for a piece of their ARPA grant funds. And as of last week, the state still has made no decisions about their ARPA funds. So here we are. I think that was at least 6, if not 9 months ago. So I have no information within which to give you to say what the state is going to do. So obviously we sought assistance from our local community through ARPA and then through our budget. But this is kind of just an overview of what we thought we might be able to accomplish. That may be optimistic. We've been very fortunate, as you can see, our collaborators on Appendix F of the people who have been willing to give of their time to be a part of trying to find solutions to what we've identified as a significant need in our community. And so, I mean, the judges take time out of their busy schedule. Jill takes time out of her busy. Zaina's been there, and we're adding Gabby now, which will be kind of helpful, very much so from that perspective. Anyway, so if you don't mind flipping it, you can just kind of see when we were trying to see what surveys have been done by other centers, because obviously a component of this we would want the director to do assessments. So we have a better assessments of what we're providing, how we're providing that, what could we provide that would be of help. And so you can see that it's in other communities, it is strongly appreciated when the service, and you can just flip through these. I don't think the commissioners need to see these for any length of time.
What self-help center is that from?
This one is from Maryland, but we looked
Okay.
at a variety because different courts call them different names and have different responsibilities depending on what court you're looking at. And so Maryland seemed to have had the most in-depth kind of research then following up. A number of the programs are in their infancy. I think people were trying to meet the need in those courts too, and just haven't completely figured out what that's going to look like. So there's a wide range if you look in other courts. So we tried to come up with a staffing plan that made sense, because obviously to follow the Kansas Supreme Court rule, because our intent was that we would also try to tap into other resources like Kansas Legal Services. And actually next week, it's kind of timely. Wednesday, Kansas Legal Services actually doing a CLE for attorneys all about providing assistance at self-help centers and just kind of limited legal services. So this is kind of what we came up with. Again, we're hopeful that we can hire someone who can maybe broaden our horizons. We've done as much research as we can, obviously, given the other demands of our job. And so, and we'll talk a little bit about the court resource specialist. Obviously, we needed a space. That's very important. And the judge has been in contact with the sheriff, and the sheriff has agreed to provide us with the area that is presently utilized by court security as their offices. They do have some equipment, and you'll see in the budget that I've asked for some desk and stuff, but we may be able to use, I don't know what we've not had a firm answer about if they plan to repurpose that or if there's something else we can find. But we think that's a really ideal location, because then court services or the court security could just direct people around the corner and then trying to model and figure out access. So here we get to, yeah. And so this, I've combined both supplemental. What was initially sent to Sarah and Cami was separate for the court resource specialist and the legal self-help director. And we went with the legal self-help director, both for many purposes, but one was to also try to tap in to KU. We've had some conversations about using our self-help as a legal clinic for the law students. So we could also bring in help in that direction. So we're looking at a variety of options to try to sustain this program and then maintain it for long term. But hopefully we'll have someone that we can hire who can also do more research and look and see what's best for this community. And then the court resource specialist was to tap into all those other needs that maybe the pandemic has exposed in a greater way, whether it's evictions, et cetera, with people needing resources. Now you have the expert right here. How lucky can you be?
Just to orient commissioners, under the new blue packet, under tab K shows a combined budget, Commissioner Kelly. And then there is a vacant position in the trustee's
That's
office that could be partially repurposed towards this goal. I think it's important to note that, so that helps. The court trustee's office is largely still based on fees collected. So while this would move it away from that model and towards total tax support. So not that the court trustee's office is completely on fee-based, but it's largely paid for by child support. So, but there's a vacant position there that can be repurposed.
So what other grant or what other funding would we be seeking out? And that's another hope for this position. Thanks, Judge. Is to try to look for grants, look for other opportunities for funding, for continued funding, but just haven't had the time to do all of that.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Judge Avery, for being here. I'll first say that I love that this idea has been talked about and formed. And when I appreciate the list of folks who have been involved in those conversations so far. Obviously know some of them from county staff, but also some of the clerk staff that have been, in my experience as a service provider and a court advocate, have been really phenomenal over the years, I think, in talking about accessibility and of the public. So I just appreciate that the court has taken that seriously and is looking to meet a need. I was surprised but intrigued to learn that that you were planning for an attorney to be that legal self-help director. And at first I was curious about it because I was worried that without that client attorney relationship that exists, that there would be limitations to what could be provided. So I appreciate you acknowledging the Supreme Court allowance for that. I wonder, maybe Judge McCabe, this is a good question for you. If you can just expand on that a little bit and kind of help me understand what limitations might exist for, what does the Supreme Court rule around that? How does it sort of define or specify what legal advice looks like and what the extent of answering questions and providing individual support for folks in that kind of setting? Can you just help me understand that difference?
No, absolutely. So the Supreme Court rule can't change the ethical boundaries that attorneys operate under. And my thought on the attorney position for this is, when we look at the people who are being asked questions now, the clerk's office, the trustee's office, court services officers, they try to answer those questions the best they can. If they have concerns, they try to ask a judge or somebody who can give them the legal answer on what they can do. I think a lot of time is spent training new staff on those issues, the amount of questions that the clerk's office and those others receive. It just struck me that really need an attorney to help to decide where those lines are, to be the person who ideally, I want to stress our clerk's office, and I appreciate your comment, does a phenomenal job trying to field those questions, court services, trustees. So it's not like there's no help for folks that are there now. This is a way to, for me, when the light came on, of not just the list of questions, which some of those questions surprised me, but the volume of them and how frequently they occur made me realize there's a need. I mean, we have Kansas Legal Services basically gave us a plug and play website, self-help website that is great. There's other resources in the community, but it became evident to me that's not meeting the demands of the people who are there. And so, you know, what's the best, most effective, informed way to address that is, in my opinion, an attorney who knows where those lines are and who can sort of organize the system in a way that makes that as efficient as possible. So that's a way of saying it happens without an attorney being there. I just think that's the best way. That attorney will have to make clear that they're providing general advice and not forming an attorney-client relationship. There's a lot of work that can be done in that space. And I think an attorney knows how to safely go up against those boundaries, whereas I stress, not because they are trying to bend rules or doing anything wrong, just non-lawyer trained people who are in that space either unintentionally cross it or don't know how far they can go, and that leaves some room for frustration for people who are trying to get answers. So that
helps. I also wonder in that kind of flow chart that you created, Linda, with how it would be staffed ideally, and then those sort of other, I'm going to read them as partnerships is what you intended, the legal aid clinic, Kansas Legal Services, et cetera. Will you help me? I heard you mention the possibility of law students doing like clinic hours. So is that another part of the reason that to have an attorney to build and create those relationships with other attorneys who might be able to provide more individual support? I guess I'm trying, when I hear self-help center, it's about access to information that's relevant and some help understanding that information and what options are in front of them, right? It's not necessarily legal advice. So
it's this,
yeah.
it's this, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And, you know, to state the obvious, I think you have a great perspective on, you know, where those questions come in and where those things are that people want answers to and what can and can't be answered. I will say the KU aspect is sort of a new development that may be sort of, if this isn't something that now is the time that the commission is looking at it favorably. I don't know this. I'm just saying I want to explore that more completely than we have to date with this. I just invited Professor Daly to join us on that. So that may be more there than I realized, and more opportunities in ways that I haven't thought about to get an attorney in there in another way. I don't know that yet.
I appreciate that y'all are thinking about that and how to strengthen some of those partnerships and think about ways that folks might be able to access attorneys, even if in a limited way, without having to go through the full referral process and the waiting that it might take for Kansas Legal Services, for example. And so I'm glad that those conversations are being explored, because we do have some important legal resources in our community, and that I want to have stronger partnerships within our court. The other question I had was just kind of logistically about space and wanting to know, I mean, I think right now, given the building setup, that space makes sense in terms of it being near the front door and easy to direct folks to. We share with me what the impact on the sheriff's department and court security might be, and what if they've got others, are they kind of relocating themselves upstairs, or are they giving up space altogether?
All I can tell you about that is the sheriff, when I first spoke to him about it, said, let me talk to my court security folks. When I spoke to him about it the second time, there was no concerns expressed to us. My thinking is that's a very nice, convenient space for them to have. But nothing was shared with me that, hey, can you guys think of something else? Because this is, you know, the cons to us, not just the pros to you. So I haven't heard that feedback from him. So I'm assuming it's not, if it's there, it's not significant enough for them to have tried to persuade us elsewhere, and I appreciate that. And, you know, the strongest point for it is the location. You come in the door, and my vision is we may open up that window and people can even before they have to, because I think some people are reluctant. If they really don't know and they're not sure, do they even want to come into the building? Well, you're in the foyer and you're already having access to something there. So that's the strength of that. If that's where it stays, and I know there's other ideas on how to re-envision the building itself. So
And I think it's also an assistant.
Microphone.
No, you might talk in the microphone.
Oh, sorry. I think it's also an assistance to court security because they get inundated with questions from the public. And the funny part was not funny, but haha, but interesting in the sense that our last self-help meeting, immediately after that, court security handed off a gentleman to me who spoke no English, and they couldn't decipher what he was looking for. But through Google Apps and all of that, we finally figured out he needed to make a payment plan, got him to the court trustee office. So that was kind of why we also looked at the kiosk, as trying to provide services for those individuals who don't, English is not their native language. And they're also trying to figure out how to navigate our justice system and what they need to do, because it takes a lot of time trying to figure out what the needs are and how do we direct them properly without wasting everybody's time.
Thank you for that.
Sorry.
That also my last question was really about the kiosks, which you didn't speak to, but that there's some information in our packet about. Will you, and it's on a separate line item, will you help me understand what the belief is about what that will add to the office and the necessity of it in addition to new staff? Help me understand where the idea for the kiosk came from.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the kiosk was, we were trying to pursue any avenue that we could that we thought might address some of the issues that we have at hand, which of course are the services. The nice thing about the kiosk is that it's kind of what other courts are looking at trying to do to provide services to individuals, and in particular, people who don't speak English as a native language. But it allows them, and a couple of things I don't know if you know that the courts have done through this pandemic is we now allow PFAs and PFSs to be completed online, which is a very helpful tool for us to get information out and allow people to complete that. This would also allow people who might come in, if they wanted to email it to themselves, they could do that right from this kiosk. It allows them to look at forms that might be available. They can then email them to themselves. So there were a variety of opportunities. And it may be, I mean, I was looking at that this might be something that might be helpful. It may be a part of a solution. I'm not exactly sure. And that's why we had the committee look at it. And we thought we'd bring it to your attention so that you could also see what other possibilities are that are available.
Questions from other commissioners?
my question was really around the kiosk, so I appreciate you asking that question, Commissioner, because I was trying to balance what's in the packet we got yesterday and what's here, and there seems to be some capital costs around that. So is it a touch-based kiosk that has an annual maintenance fee for the software that's behind it? And then I think providing self-help is have you thought at all about tiering this up in some way? You know, do you start with the kiosk, then I mean, certainly it would be better to have a person there than a kiosk, but have you thought about that at all?
That's definitely, again, we just had the presentation on the kiosks. We didn't really have an opportunity at that meeting to sort of get, wanted to let everybody think about it. I intend to ask questions about it. I have mixed feelings about the efficacy of it. One of our team was going to follow up with the courts that have contracted with the person we heard from, get their impressions on things. But I think the whole thing is susceptible to being tiered and approached. It's just now's the time to ask. And so we're asking. And I say that respectfully and without apology. We're trying to explore as much as we can. And again, sort of quantifying the need. I don't know how many people, and we need to figure out how many people access our self-help page. And, I've heard about the volume of people who talk to the clerk's office and maybe asking that one question is all they need done. but that's time away and it's time consuming. So how to measure the need and or the impact, that's sort of, we brainstormed ideas on how to approach it. I think narrowing that down a little bit more is, and exploring other options yet. So yes, it's all in flux in that way.
Commissioner Reed again, just one last question. I'm aware of Johnson County's self-help. Are there other spots in the state, other courts in the state that have some iteration of this that you've also spoken to?
So I'll let Linda.
Yes, there is. Significant variation, none as grand as the Cadillac that Johnson County has. Wyandotte has a fairly simple model and they too use Kansas Legal Services. And Harvey and McPherson County, they use Kansas Legal Services and they have a color dot system. So if you come and ask a question at the clerk's office, they give you a dot that kind of would direct you to go to the computer to try to figure out what that might mean and how to figure it out. That's as far as they go to trying to assist people, but at least they're trying to do something. I know that there are other, Franklin County has something very simple where you have a computer that you can go and get on and go to judicial council. And so we try to actually give those resources out to people so they don't have to sit at a computer in the lobby, just because we have so many people who take up the 3 computers we have in the lobby. So yeah, we're all trying variations, but nothing like Johnson County. They're the.
And my guess is that those counties haven't, maybe they have found out how many questions are their clerks still getting, how many questions are still being asked, and how much time is being taken away. So again, I think different courts try to approach it in different ways. My sense is this is a conversation that's building among districts in Kansas. I know OJA is interested in what we're doing. And so.
Thanks, that helps. I was just curious if it was, if Johnson County was the only one that we are aware of kind of operating under that Kansas Supreme Court rule, or if we were seeing it elsewhere. You brought up one more question for me. I'm bogarting a little bit. So it's not necessarily related to the self-help specifically, but in terms of access, you mentioned the computers in Franklin County that are available, and we've got computers here in our clerk's office meant to be accessible for looking up case information, which is not a publicly available website. Do you all happen to have an update on timeline with, aren't we switching to a new district court case system that will be a publicly available website? Do you have any idea what the timeline on that is?
Sometime in the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
2023 is what we've been told,
Okay.
but we were told, obviously we expected to be online now.
That's what I thought too. Okay, I appreciate that update. Just curious. And it's an accessibility piece.
Absolutely.
For certain, fielding questions just about next court dates, case numbers, trying to locate old files that people want to request, those sort of things. So
Sure.
thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, well, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank
Have a
you.
good rest of your day.
Appreciate it.
Okay, with that, I believe that we have Kansas Holistic Defenders next.
If you want to come on up. Am I on? I think so. Okay. Oh, yeah. We'll adjust it. I'll adjust it. Thanks for being here today. And just this is an opportunity to answer any questions commissioners might have about your supplemental request.
Absolutely. Before the questions, I know that we're technically competing over the same pool of money, but I did want to say I would really support the judge's request for self-help center. We field calls all the time from people who aren't our clients, some fairly basic legal questions, fixes. And so I can definitely say that the need is out there. And the model they propose seems very good to us, but more interested in you funding, of course, what we've asked for.
This is Commissioner Reed. So I appreciate you gave us a really thorough budget request, and I was just curious if you can talk to us a little bit about some of the fundraising efforts as well as other grants that you've obtained in this not quite first year of operation, but just about, and talk to us about what that momentum has looked like and what else you're doing besides the misdemeanor defense work that the county is contracting you.
Yes, absolutely. So I will say one of the difficulties of being the executive director who's also in court every day is that does make fundraising harder than it would be otherwise, right? I'm doing those calls and those grant writing on top of our other work that we have to be doing. However, I will say that there have been some very significant grants that we have been able to obtain. The first I want to talk about is the Children's Cabinet has funded. My colleague here, Rebecca Gaston, just started this month. And the funding for that program was set up by the Center for Public Partnerships and Research at KU. It's federal money funneled through the state for basically child welfare. The idea being that one solution to the problem of child removals, sink cases, neglect, is to go upstream and try to solve legal problems that if they go unaddressed, make people much more likely to have DCF involvement. So she's going to be focusing through a referral stream primarily out of Shawnee County on 3 areas, housing and evictions. The idea being that if you can stop a family from becoming homeless, that stops a lot of other problems that may happen for the family. Second one being IEP, individual education plans. Many parents can tell you how difficult it often is, particularly for working class parents, to access the accommodations that their children are entitled to under the ADA and under state law. Having an attorney and advocates working on that can often help make sure that children with disabilities get what they need in school, and again, prevents future problems. And the third thing is benefits, that is both doing what our advocates do for many of our clients right now, just basic hooking up clients with benefits, vital documents, helping clients fill out all the forms and processes that are necessary to access many forms of state welfare, but also litigation of those benefits, which is why having an attorney there. That's a 3-year pilot program. And we're also partnering with Harvard's Access to Justice Lab, who is running a study of that program to basically compare folks that get Rebecca and our advocate services to a control group to determine over that period of 3 years, what's the impact on the rate of DCF involvement. So that funding from CVCAP is, and I need to pull up the exact number, that is roughly $475,000 over 3 years. That goes to the pay for one of our advocates and Rebecca's salary and benefits, and additionally some overhead associated with that program. In addition, we have gone to Harvard's Access to Justice program for grant writing assistance to write a grant for what we're calling Defender Data Specialist. The overall cost of that would be $87,000 that we're looking for to pay for somebody doing data entry on both the civil and the criminal ends full-time, as well as administering our very cool, very sophisticated, but definitely labor-intensive case management system. So we've been able to access that. We've applied to some other grants as well. We have a grant for $25,000 that we wrote to the Shoemaker Foundation. We're planning to apply again to the Douglas County Community Foundation, who awarded us $10,000 last year. And additionally, we're going back to all of our private donors from whom we raised $100,000 last year to continue funding our sort of baseline overhead. Which does bring us to sort of what we're asking for here, and why is that when you're fundraising, the last thing that people want to give you money for is your very boring basic operating costs. And what they want to fund is specific programs. Our theory here is that if the county is able to cover some of these very unglamorous pieces of our basic recurring infrastructure, that is, our phone system, our case management system, our Westlaw subscriptions for legal research, our website and internet access, that then allows us to not have to ask donors for those things, but rather ask donors for things that they are much more excited to fund and will likely therefore give more overall as a result. So we see the county's investment in the overhead that we're asking for as having a potential multiplier effect with the money that we're able to raise through our own fundraising efforts. Does that answer your question?
Any questions from the commissioners?
So I appreciate in the budget narrative, you gave us some data from February 1st through April 5th. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see a whole lot of other data regarding the impact these services have had. Is there an understanding that it's very new and you're getting it as you think about it? That was something we talked about in our initial conversations. What kind of when you look at measuring the success of this program, what are you thinking about measuring that can show how we are, how these services are really making a benefit for our community?
So I talked to Sarah about this. We had sort of proposed making a sort of report over the summer. It was the input of staff that the summer's not a good time for you all, and so wanted to move that back to December for a full report on our impact. However, I am prepared to give you some numbers right now. So we have right now 181 open cases spread out across 3 attorneys. With nearly all of those, except when we've been appointed off the docket, we have been able to meet with folks in custody ahead of that first appearance. That has meant that, and part of this is that there's some data that we don't necessarily have access to for the comparative, right? But the data would be available for, say, what now with us doing misdemeanors is the new rate at which people are released on pretrial. I will say, anecdotally, there are many clients for which we have been able to go to the court with a specific release plan and get them out on pretrial release that otherwise would not have happened. I'll give you one example from a few months ago. We had a client who had been in for about 3 months he was facing a potential probation violation. We were able to make a motion to modify bond. We got him a spot at the shelter, which is very difficult to do, actually. You have to call basically 7 times a day until a spot opens up. But we did get him out on a spot there. Then the shelter had a requirement that he get a vaccination to be admitted. So we booked an appointment at Walgreens, took him to the Walgreens to get the vaccination. And then we're able to get him over the shelter, and then continue to provide him with services for the while he was working with our advocates, and he's been doing great. That's a similar story we could tell for a number of our other clients. I would also say that we have had at least 11 dismissals. And I will say that's significant because a number of those cases that were dismissed were cases that were set for trial. And I believe that it's because they were set for trial and we were able to thoroughly investigate them, provide the exculpatory evidence that those cases then did get dismissed. Basically that puts about 5% of our cases at being in this posture of getting dismissed due to the litigation efforts here. So we will have the sort of full scope of all the metrics that were identified in our contract, that is rates of pretrial release, rates, the speed at which cases are ultimately being resolved, types of resolutions. But that data isn't available yet this summer. But of course, if the commission does want it, we can go ahead and assemble that this summer. But the input that we had from county staff was that that wouldn't be requested at this point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I understand summer's a good time, but here, this is when we're looking at budget. So, yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have had a little more data there, I guess, but I understand that that it may not be a good time, but.
And I think we could do something before December. December is also not a great time. So, but sometime between budget and the end of the year, I think would be a good time for, some additional information. And then moving forward, once you've got a full year under your belt, I think that's the kind of information. It's just great to include in your supplemental request.
Certainly.
Or your base community partner budget request.
And I'll also say that we have been working closely with Matt Ravens to get data on some of the systemic areas that we've been looking into that our clients are running into as hurdles, and also about potentially generating the data to sort of compare us to the control and from previous years as well. And so that is something we're very excited about and can accommodate on request, but we just need the time to be able to put those together. But our case management system, which is one of the things that would be funded here, is very robust in this regard. I will say, we track demographic information. We track every time that we make a referral. We track each and every court date. I can pull up now data on average length of case, types of cases, the charges that we're seeing, patterns of those charges. So this system is set up to gather a very robust data set, which is why it's, I think, a good thing for the county to be funding for us. This is a system that's being essentially designed from scratch according to the needs of our office to be the model for other offices. And so you'll see that it costs only about $14,000 per year. If we compare that to say the DA's case management system, I think that was clocking in about 200,000. I think we are squeezing every penny here and trying to put the least amount of burden that we can on the county in this request.
To that end, and as you mentioned, as you're looking for other fundraising and just ways to support your work, I'd say, and we've had this happen with other community partners in the past, if we, that in federal grants, there's this whole supplemental supplanting. The county does not have supplanting issues. If you're able to find outside funds to pay for perhaps a staff person that is more interesting for an outside funder to fund. And, I think we would entertain reallocating those funds for something like, subscriptions and phone systems and those kinds of things to provide that operation. So just keep that in mind as you're looking to do that. If you're able to find funding that would cover something the county existingly funds, we can switch some stuff around.
Absolutely. And I will just flag that. So last year we'd applied for the Edward J. Byrne JAG grant. I've been keeping my eye on the new submissions for that. They haven't been open. They're not coming through yet, which is a little unusual, but as soon as that is available, I think we would like to resubmit what we submitted last year. And again, now with some more data to show the proof of concept for an advocate. And last year we did it as a pass-through with basically a pass-through letter being done by the commission. Be happy to work much more closely on the application this time around. It's not a hard application to complete. We've already done it. But it is just for context, that JAG grant, no money was awarded to Douglas County for any institutions last year. The vast majority of the funds were allocated to law enforcement or DA's offices. I think nothing of it was put towards defense as a, and I do think that defense and type of work that we do is a part of public safety.
To Commissioner Reed again, Commissioner Kelly's question just about data and stuff, and I appreciate you running down some of those numbers that you have now, and we'll look forward to more in the future. I think I heard you say that the case management system you have is tracking referrals, so you'll be able to tell us what community partners or how many community partner referrals that your office is helping make connections with. Is that accurate?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. And if you give me a minute, I can actually pull up the number of referrals that we've made so far.
Sure, if you have it quickly. And then I guess my other question is, you talked about fundraising, and I hear you. Fundraising is a tricky game, and people like to give money for certain things sometimes, and it is sometimes a hard sell to convince people that functional costs are important to fund too, and make all of it go round, right? But I think in your supplemental request, you talked about a client emergency fund, and that's what predominantly it sounds like folks have been fundraised sort of for, or those dollars have been geared towards. You've talked about raising about 100,000 in the past 6-ish months or so that you've been operating. About how much have you spent on client emergency services that you were unable to find other resources for in the community? So
we basically, until we have the funding set aside from that, we're not right now funding client emergency services. We have been using ECANS has about $8,000 that's been set aside to help pay court fees. We have been enthusiastically partnering with them on that. We've been diving into we sort of feel like we're stitching together a social safety net out of twigs and leaves, right? So the Disability Rights Center has money that's available for housing. We're able to access that. And then the HRC through the county, we draw very frequently for emergency housing. Been in talks with some other local organizations that have been doing similar work about specifically the niche for a client emergency fund. What we're finding is that, sometimes we can make a very solid release plan, but then some very small pieces of it, like client not having access to a phone, having all of the transportation needs met to get someone to that program that they're supposed to be at right now, right? There are some of those transport, like an Uber, right, that we are paying for right now. But what we're hoping to do is have a specific pool of money that we fundraise for our basic pool of operating costs that we get from larger donors, and then our county funding. And I would also just say that in terms of our operations, right, we've done our own austerity. Like, we met for the first time with Sarah, and we've been requesting a 6% inflation pay increase and knocked that down to 3. And we really tried to put forward our most minimal recurring expenses. So for instance, this doesn't include our rent, right? We're paying like 15,000 for office space there. It doesn't include, bar dues. It doesn't include our malpractice insurance. Basically, the overhead items that are represented in this budget represent about 1/3 of the overall recurring costs of the office. I know it's some people's practice to say sort of shoot for the moon and then like hope you get half. We're not doing that. We are shooting for a low number with the expectation that we get all of it, because we went ahead on our end and cut substantially there. So the client emergency fund is, again, something that we want to get a specific pool of money for and specific grants for, get our overhead covered by the grants that we can, and then have the county supplementing that as the most baseline simple costs that we can allocate fairly to the county.
Thank you, Sam. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, thank you both for being here. Rebecca, nice to see you. Have a good rest of your day.
Want to take a quick break before
That would be great.
we bring in historical societies? Great.
Wonderful. Thank
Thank you.
Reservation partners, if you want
Paul
to
and
come
Steve and
take seats, it looks like we've got
Ben.
5 chairs, 4 microphones. Might have to share a little bit.
Hi there. How's it going, Holly? Good. If you're gonna want to talk in the microphone, you're gonna have to pull up to this table. Paul. No. Yeah, they do roll.
Yeah, they get away from
They
you.
do roll. They do roll.
We need anchors. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. I appreciate you all working together to and coming together to have this conversation with us. I wonder if maybe process-wise, the best way to dive in is just to see if commissioners have specific questions about specific requests, or unless either of you have a different suggestion for how to discuss this with our number of guests.
Only thing I would just add is that we have gone, that I don't know if this group was aware that hopefully approved tonight in our ARPA requests was the ARPA funding proposals is included for tonight's conversation related to those. So those are included in the funded amount.
Yes, the fully requested amounts by all those, which I really appreciate that you worked in concert together to bring those requests forward to us, and we did approve all of them at full funding. So excited to support those one-time project costs.
You have to turn
turn
the
your mic
button
on.
on
Oh,
to
yeah,
green.
sorry.
We're excited too. I think with the excitement will build as it kind of sinks in. But it's an opportunity for us to make an amazing investment in the facilities that we're preserving for the public.
Well, this is Commissioner Kelly. I'll just maybe jump in with a question if it's okay on that. I'm glad to hear you're excited. But and it sort of is nice to come full circle, because I think when you came to us last year, a lot of the requests that ended up in our ARPA request, we said, think about ARPA. My question to you all is, as you think about those being funded, how does that impact your overall budget situation? You know, I mean, some of the requests, the supplemental requests you have here aren't necessarily related to the ARPA request, but it does impact your overall budget. So I'd just like to hear your perspective on that, maybe from each one of you, if that's okay.
And if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, we've got members of the public
on
list.
the
Of
line,
course.
that'd be
Be
great.
great.
Thanks.
I'm Steve Novak. I'm the director of the executive director of the Douglas County Historical Society and Watkins Museum of History. And for us, and I think since I kind of pulled the proposal together, I can probably say this in an umbrella way for all the organizations. We specifically put forward projects that were one-time investments in our facilities, things that we had just been unable to do in other ways, but things that will set us up for being more accessible to the public or preserving our buildings better. We all put forward projects that did not increase our operating expense or require that we build new capabilities or take on any new responsibilities. It's really investments in infrastructure. And those investments are great. They don't address the operating need that we have, which, you know, is the result of recovering from the pandemic and also dealing with the economic times that we have. But it's wonderful to address those. And in some cases, I know certainly with the Watkins Museum, we have kind of this ongoing expense of propping up our elevator and making sure that it keeps working. That will go away once we have it all replaced. So it'll have a small but a positive impact on our operations.
I'm Ben Terwilliger. I'm the executive director of the Eudora Area Historical Society. And yeah, to echo what Steve said, the ARPA request really won't impact the Eudora Area Historical Society's budget request to the county. The Eudora Area Historical Society requests funds for operating expenses, particularly staff salary. So our ARPA project for a new roof, which is desperately needed because part of our roof is 30 years old and leaks. So we desperately needed a new roof, but that really won't impact our annual budget request to the county.
You gotta turn the button. There you go.
Paul Baumar, president of the Compton Historical Society, and our request is for the improvements that need to take place on Fort Titus, and also the deterioration of the window screens. And I don't know whether I have an opportunity to say this, but I am going to say this. Recently, when the Abe's Across America toured Lecompton, they had a reporter accompanying them from Reuter's organization. And when he left, we told him, he said he had learned a lot about Kansas that he absolutely did not know. And we said to him twice, well, you get back to the White House, you be sure and tell them that you were quoting, meaning Kansas, Douglas County, and Lecompton, in the birthplace of the Civil War, and it was not South Carolina. And let me tell you, if Kansas would adopt that as their slogan, it would certainly gain a lot of attention, because it's a true statement. It really is a true statement. So that's all I had to say.
Kwekwe. Hello, in my tribal language, I'm Holly Zane. I'm the interim executive director for Freedom's Frontier only until the 25th of July. At that point in time, I'd like to introduce our new director, Lucinda Adams. Our request for funds is for operations to provide for a portion of salary for the individual that does fundraising, but also to educate the public on the national heritage areas. We've had a lot of attacks on national heritage areas, which indeed kind of attacks our partners, that says that we gobble up land, we tell people how they can use their land or their resources. It's a lie that's being spread across the United States, including in this county too. We've received a couple letters from homeowners that think that what Freedom's Frontier does is contemplated with the 30 by 30 Act. If you're familiar with our originating act or enabling legislature, we can't affect land, we can't affect minerals, we can't affect water rights. In fact, you have to opt in. You have to have historically significant property, and you have to say, I want to be a partner to be part of it. But there is a lie that is spreading everywhere, and it is affecting our partners too. I also would like to say how appreciative Freedom's Frontier is for Douglas County's support, allowing us to have your operating funds and your grants to our other heritage partners here in Douglas County. Allows us to use that as match money to allow us to pull down more federal money that we then can turn around and give as grants. And we would not be able to do that without you all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janet Faust. I'm the treasurer of the Clinton Lake Historical Society. And we are very grateful to Douglas County because we are a very, very small museum out in the middle of nowhere. So resources, monetary resources come through very slimly. So without Douglas County, we couldn't have had our museum the way it is and been able to grow it the way it is. And so the ARPA support is huge for us to get ourselves up to ADA compliancy on some issues. And then a little bit amount of money that we're asking supplementally in this is really to help us with some of our operational expenses as we kind of did an analysis of what our insurance is going to cost us this year and next year, what our even the supplies, we did a comparison to what they were costing us in 2020 versus what they're costing us in 2022. There's huge increases, anywhere from 11% for the cost of some of the labor we have with the maintenance, up to as much as even 55% on some of the office supplies that we're buying now versus 2 years ago. So when we ask for, it seems like a little small amount of money, it's going to make a big difference in this year and next year as we kind of weigh out this whole inflation situation and our operational costs. So, but we're so thankful because we wouldn't be where we are today without Douglas County support.
Other questions, Commissioner Kelly? Commissioner Portillo? I just wanted to ask a question. Many of you, I believe all of you, but I might be a little off on that. Many of you specifically made a request to restore previously cut funding. But a few of, and that's kind of the theme across the board. And I suspect that you all partnered and have been in your collaborations, have had those conversations and sort of a joint effort. Some of you requested more than that restoration, and we've heard a little bit about that. But what I'm interested to understand and know more, because I think beyond this year's budget and the requests that we have in front of us, there's perhaps a larger conversation to be had about the funding structure and allocations across you all as partners and the differences in those. You each have different levels of staffing and capacity for what you do. But I guess I'd just like to hear a little bit more from you as a group collectively, or anybody who's willing to share thoughts about what your conversations have been about the sort of, I guess, parsing out of funding amongst your different independent organizations and the differences in funding between that. Is that question making sense?
It makes sense to me, and I promise you I won't answer your question, but I want to provide some background kind of on my way to that answer, because this is something that we've been thinking about both in the Douglas County Historical Society and among all of the partners about, what do we have to do to make sure that we exist for future generations, which is for all of our missions. I wanted to make sure I got this right, so I wrote it down, which seems a little formal for this setting, but I'm going to read it anyway. The heritage agencies in Douglas County last received an increase in funding in 2018. That amount was reduced by a small percentage the following year and has remained the same since. In 2020, we all faced the COVID pandemic, the effects of that, and the need to close our facilities temporarily. We're now experiencing the aftermath of the pandemic and addressing what it takes to recover and restore our operations to pre-pandemic levels while facing new challenges of inflation and economic uncertainty. The impact of these circumstances is significant, but it's not all bad. As a result of maintaining operations during the pandemic, we've developed new skills for engaging the public through online programming and social media. We can provide educational resources online. We found new ways to work together, particularly through programming partnerships, shared resources, and collaborative grant projects like the Arpa project or an NEH grant that we currently have open that's helping us build lesson plans for K through 12 field trips to each of our institutions around a theme that links a visit to each site. And we're also, we've also come to realize that our collective impact is significant and it stretches county-wide. Our organizations are drivers for heritage tourism. We undertake efforts that support equity and build cultural understanding. And according to the Americans for the Arts Economic Indicator for cultural organizations, in 2019, before our operations were affected by the pandemic, we had a collective economic impact of $3.2 million countywide. Of course, there's been some bad stuff from the pandemic too. Reduced attendance has significantly decreased earned revenue. We're even seeing now with inflation and people's concerns about cost, the amount of donations we receive at the front door has decreased, even though summer travel is starting to respond. Many of the once successful approaches we had for public programmings and fundraisers just don't work very well post-pandemic. Not a lot of people want to pack on a bus with a bunch of strangers and pay $20 to do that. Fuel prices, inflation, and health concerns have all curtailed travel, especially bus tours. School budget challenges have reduced field trips, and these are conditions that we realize may exist for years. Finally, sustaining public engagement and education through online efforts has created needs for new kinds of infrastructure and new staffing needs and new operational expenses. It required that we expand the way we reach out. That requires operational support. And now I'm getting to the answer to the question. After the budget review meeting that we had, encouraged by county staff, many of us revised our request for additional funding to support what we saw as our real current actual needs. We did this in a modest way, as Janet was describing, to address operational needs that we face now. How are we going to pay that increased copier bill or the higher utility payments? This additional support is critical to maintaining operations while we seek new sources of support and develop new forms of public engagement. But it will not assure a sustainable future for the county's heritage sites. Long-term sustainability will require new models of structure and support, better integration of efforts among the heritage agencies and alignment with county programs and priorities, and permanent dedicated sources of financial support. Douglas County is proud of its heritage, and county heritage provides opportunities to bring people together and to build understanding in our communities. Once our immediate needs are addressed, we need to work with you, with county staff, with the Heritage Coordinator and the Heritage Conservation Council, and the Open Spaces Planning effort to find ways to establish a solid financial foundation that will support heritage agencies' public service for generations to come. That felt kind of formal and had a lot of words. The upshot of it is that the circumstances that we work under now are kind of like living paycheck to paycheck. We're worried about making enough money to pay our current bills. That doesn't allow us to look forward to thinking, how can we better serve our communities? What sorts of infrastructures or capabilities would we need in order to be able to do that? I think we're all eager to, well, by our missions, we're required to continue our operations, but I think we're all eager to increase our impact in the county. And doing that means we need to think about a new model. Where does funding come from? Is there a way to dedicate it so that we know how much money we're working from? Are there new ways to distribute it across the organizations and to build up the capacity at each site? I don't have all the answers. I have some thoughts. That's not what this meeting is about. But if this is a way to kickstart those conversations, I'm sure we would all be really, really happy to join in that.
I appreciate that, Steve. Thanks. Does anybody else want to add anything?
We have situation in that we have Constitution Hall, which is a state facility. Constitution Hall is the only one of the 15 sites that is open year round, 5 days a week. The others are mostly all seasonal. I credit that to the support from Douglas County, which allows us to help Tim in any of his efforts. Plus, it would not be happening if it were not for Senator Francisco and Representative Tom Sloan and Mike Amix, Representative Mike Amix, of their unbelievable support for Constitution Hall. And I've mentioned this before. What happens if Constitution Hall is no longer a state facility, if they decide to close it? I'm just saying that because you see what's happened at the other historic sites. And that's why I said, if we advertise Kansas as the birthplace of the Civil War and not St. Louis, we would certainly get a lot of attention. But I do think that is, and I've said it before many times, that is a concern for Douglas County in the future.
So I appreciate your statement, Steve, because I think it gets to a real tension that happens with community partners. And, you know, certainly the dollars that were there in 2018 don't buy the same stuff in 2022, especially after a pandemic and especially facing the inflation costs that we have. At the same time, you know, we have, the county has a responsibility to make sure we have county services in place, and these are community partners, which is a little different. And I'm interested to hear from you all who, to your own admission, you said you have really benefited from support of Douglas County, and typically in Kansas counties, this doesn't happen. You said, like, we'd like to know what looks like in the future, right? And yet it's a little tricky. I think every community partner we have in here could make an ask for us to increase wages at some point, and we have a lot of those this time, more than I remember in the past. I'm just interested to hear from this group sort of what your thinking is on how we could be, how this process might improve, how you might get a more predictable, you know, and I'm not saying this is a good idea, but just this is an idea. You know, is it, we'd like to see a 1% increase, you know, because or is it around specific projects? Do you get my point here? It's just how we think about funding community partners, because, you know, based on a lot of the requests that we have, you know, everybody would like to increase their wages, and yet that's not the way I think of our community partners. So I toss that out there to see if you have any reaction to that as community partners in this space. You're sort of our Kansas Holistic Defenders was really our first one, but you're really the first one we've had so far around community partners. And I expect to ask this question a lot.
Well, I don't think I have any answers, probably more than just thoughts that throw out there, but you know, it kind of reminds me of right now there's a pot of money that's available for the heritage organizations. And over the course of time, and I'm not familiar with the history because I only came into this group 3 or 4 years ago, but I'm guessing that it probably just grew from what somebody needed at the time. And then every year after that, it's, you know, keep it flat, or you can have a 1% or a 2% or whatever the numbers might have been over the course of years. So I think it probably wasn't ever set up very fairly based on each organizations and their needs. It was just their needs at the time that they came and asked Douglas County for support, and you saw it worth their time to support it. That being said, I don't know how you can take and shake the pot up and say, okay, this is the finite money that we have. Let's reallocate it to each one based on performance or based on attendance or based on, I don't think there's a way to do that with a finite amount of money that exists today, because so much of the operational expenses or the way we go to business with our organizations depends on the amount that we have, and sadly say, gotten used to having. So I don't have a solution, but I understand the situation where there are organizations that probably deserve more than what Clinton Lake gets, or vice versa. Clinton Lake maybe deserves more than somebody else gets. I don't know that for facts, but I'm sure that's out there. And I don't have a quick fix, but I think it needs to be talked about. And I think it's got to be some brainstorming sessions, or there's got to be some Heritage Council discussions about how do we start making it more fairly based on what each organization brings to the economic of Douglas County.
And I think that challenge is but the boundaries of finite resources. So I think I'm going to provide two answers to your one question. In terms of what would it, under current circumstances, what would make it easier for community partners to plan for the future and move forward on a more solid footing. I think the county budget process feels a lot like a grant application process. The county has been remarkably supportive, and in the entire almost 12 years that I've been here, we've only had one teeny tiny reduction. But technically, we could get nothing if circumstances existed like that. So a business would, when their roof needs repair, they would take out a loan and repair the building, move forward. We have no guarantees we'd be able to make a loan payment if we took that approach. So we live paycheck to paycheck. I think if we knew that the pool was dedicated, that it couldn't be pulled away from us, that it would increase. I don't know, some states build budgets on a 2-year basis, that we would know we'd have 1% more over the course of the next 2 years. It would be something that we could plan around, and that would be a big help. I think that another answer might be in looking at how other counties fund heritage. In Riley County, it's a county department, and they receive support through through a dedicated tax that supports particular heritage activities. I think they maintain 3 sites, but they run like if they were a county department. It's a little bit different in Johnson County. They also are supported by a dedicated tax. Theirs is for arts and culture, and it's administered through a county parks department and supports 4 organizations, a history museum and 3 cultural arts organizations. According to their director, they don't do fundraising. They know how much money they're going to have every year, and change with the tax base. That's Johnson County. That might not be the model that works for us, but the model that we established is exactly what Janet described. It was completely circumstantial as need arose. And speaking for the Douglas County Historical Society, that need arose in the early 70s with the preservation of the Watkins building. And basically the county said, okay, if you're going to take responsibility for owning the building, we will provide you some funding so you can operate it. And operating expenses increased quite a bit over the course of 50 years. And the model that was established, we'll just give you a little bit out of the operating fund, and we'll treat you like an outside agency. That model has kind of run its course in 50 years. And it feels like we need to be looking for something different to sustain heritage in Douglas County.
Commissioner Kelly knows I love these conversations about structure and how we approach things. And, there's a couple things I'd add just as while we're brainstorming here. The notion of commitment for ongoing funding. We can't ever obligate a future commission. I can't sign a 5-year contract, Steve, because we can't obligate a future commission to, if you went out and took a vote of the people and got a sales tax passed, now that could be a different structure. But I just think it's important for everyone to understand our limitations too, as well, as to what we're allowed to do. The notion of, and love being a Debbie Downer in these situations. You know, the notion of if it were to become more a part of county operations, having worked in Johnson County for 11 years, I can tell you they close sites. So, you know, if you want to go that route and you become more integrated into the county structure, they could decide to not support a site based off of their internal budget structure. So, and you lose that autonomy. So with additional help and financial support, often comes less autonomy. And so I think it's important for you all to think about that as we're brainstorming ideas here as to how to approach a solution.
And I didn't say any of these ideas were good ideas. And our autonomy is something that's really valuable to us. And we completely understand the way the county has to work. You know, when you say you can't make a commitment for a commission in 2026, you can't do that. Priorities change. We also understand that you're juggling needs for the whole county, not just for us, but the willingness to talk about it and find new models, I think that's the first place we need to go.
Yeah, and that was sort of the purpose of my question was as we think about some of the requests that you have here, some of these are ongoing costs. And when we can't make that commitment for future commissions, what seems like a 3% increase this year, if the future commission doesn't, now you're in the hole even deeper, right? And so I just think as these requests come forward, it's just a frame to put that around. There's some problems with our process. Certainly there are, but it's in place for a reason. And it's just helpful for us to communicate to you that, and for you to, I mean, that's why we have these little get-togethers, right? But that's just my thoughts around it.
And part of the issue, I think, is we talk about these problems at budget time when we're trying to address an immediate need. What we really need to be doing is talking about these things in like October and November when a budget goes to bed and we don't have that current pressure. We can think more effectively about what would work for us for the future. So when you want to schedule a work session, just let me know and I'll contact everyone else.
And every conversation we have about this, I have to have it with about 25 additional other community partners.
Any other questions from commissioners this time? Okay, well, thank you all for being here. We appreciate the conversation, appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your day.
Good to see you. I know. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. There's no, oh, thanks. Sure. Yeah, great. I'll pass it out. Thanks, Holly. Marlon, you want to come up and Fair Board? We just have a few minutes. We're running a little ahead of schedule, but we got a little bit of time. Yeah, we kind of had both of you scheduled at the same time. So if you want to come and you want to bring Candace, yep, thanks. No, yeah. Really, this is just an opportunity to answer questions about the supplemental request in the packet. There's a request from Extension Council for $25,000 and then a small increase for the Fair Board as well.
Questions from either of my fellow commissioners?
I do have a question about the Youth Futures Mentoring Project. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I didn't know a lot about it until I read your packet. And I know there has been a staffing change at Free State High School. That's the school that you were working with. I know the school district has made some changes to their AVID program, and just was interested in sort of how that's going and how you may adjust Youth Futures. I love youth mentoring. It's best practice, really reduces dropout rates, all kinds of great things. But was interested why you think the county is the right place for this and not the school district. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so first Marlon Bates, County Extension Director for K-State Research and Extension Douglas County. This is our board chair, Peter Wren. Also with us in the gallery, Caitlin Piney, who's our, oh my gosh, there she is. You snuck right behind me. So Caitlin Piney is our Community Health and Wellness Agent. Also in the gallery is our board treasurer, that's Claire Harding. Great questions, Commissioner Kelly. I handed out a quick little thing after our budget hearing conversation with Sarah. One of the things she suggested was we give a little bit more information on the context of the budget request. So you really have two questions. One is about what our plan would be going forward. Historically, for the last 2 years, we have used that AVID program as the exclusive partner for how we reach youth, but that's not necessarily prerequisite. That's not something that we have to do. So I guess there's two avenues to potentially pursue. One would be, make another determination on how best to reach an audience of high school students who are generally underrepresented in colleges. And then that could be at Free State, that could be at any high school in the county. So I think your second question was about why do we think that the county would be a better partner than the school district? Well, we felt like the school district was the partner to pursue some financial support for this, given the close nature. But I think what enables us to maybe make that program grow beyond the Lawrence School District is support from a non-district partner. I think there's also opportunity to expand, potentially expand in the future. What we're asking for this program is $15,000. Our goal would be to reach 60 students, but also equip 12 to 15 college students to be those positive youth mentors from that sort of young adult perspective. And then hopefully, obviously, enable them to do that outside of the bounds of any named program. But that could potentially expand if we were able to secure additional funding from other sources, including school districts across the county.
Marlon, this is Commissioner Reed, have you talked with other school districts? I mean, given that, because the program is just at Free State thus far, right? So one of 2 high schools in the Lawrence School District. Have you had conversations either with Lawrence High or Lawrence's district at large, but also Baldwin, Eudora, and Lecompton schools?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to defer to Caitlin. I think our original plan was to work with both Lawrence High School and Free State, but the pandemic kind of threw a wrench in those gears. But as far as other schools, including Baldwin and Eudora, I'll let Caitlin speak to that.
For sure. Honestly, we have not at this point, and a lot of that has to do with staffing capacity and the funding that we've received through the grant. So we have not explored those options. It takes a lot to manage 14 to 15 college age mentors serving 60 high school students. And just being realistic about what that looks like. So I can't say that we have explored Baldwin or Eudora. I will tell you initially, we were working with Lawrence High, and then we ended up stopping that relationship because of the pandemic. They ran their AVID program a little bit differently over the pandemic versus Free State. We were actually able to mentor young people virtually at our Free State site. So just having that willing partner, and a lot of it has to do is finding that champion at that high school to work with. And we know that that's really a huge reason why we've been so successful at our Free State site.
Other questions about this, about the extension request? Okay. Okay, well, maybe we can hear from the Fair Board. If y'all want to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you want us to know.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Hensinger. I am the treasurer for the Douglas County Fair Board, and this is my cohort. This is Candace, our secretary. We're asking for a $5,000 increase in our budget. As you know, everything has gone up this year tremendously. One thing that went up quite a bit for us this year was our insurance for our spring derby. That went up, it quadrupled in price this year. And one thing that it's on your sheet, but one of the things that we found was that the insurance we definitely have to have. That's way way, way important to make sure that we have coverage for that, so nobody can come back. But the vendor fees, the entertainment, the food costs, the fuel, cleaning services, just for the petting zoo and the cleaning service has doubled since last year's fair. And I can give you an example that the petting zoo was $2,000 last year. It's $4,000 this year. So $5,000 increase. I'm sorry, $3,000 increase would, yeah, sorry, didn't mean to scare you. $3,000 increase, would help a lot with offsetting these expenses. We do fundraising, and we have a lot of people that help with that. And the other thing, we don't want to start charging other than the Derby and the bull ride. This is a free fair. We want to really keep it that way. And we want everybody to be able to come out and enjoy it. And I don't want to have to charge like we do at the state fair. So that's another reason that we would like to see this increase come about. So do you guys have any questions?
I had just one question for you. I noticed in the budget sheet, there's a line for other sponsorships and awards, which has fluctuated over time. Will you just talk to me a little bit about what those are, like some examples of what exactly sponsorships and awards?
The sponsorships and awards are people that maybe donate to the fair board and want it to be spent on like awards, or they want it to be spent on the auction, or go ahead. That they have specific places they want to. Others let us use it wherever we decide we need to use it. So sometimes it's designated to one spot, but other times it's not. So it has to be, and if it's designated to one spot, like the Bromosec, that has to be done for 4-H only. So there are certain spots where it has to be right for that particular event or project.
So that's a part of fundraising and donors, not necessarily other grants or other organizations that are providing specific funding. Okay, thanks. That clarifies it.
And then we also, we've got food that we need to buy and supplies and stuff, so that we want to, I don't want us to run short. I don't want, my biggest thing is I don't want anybody to get hurt and come back on Douglas County because they're at the fairgrounds. So the insurance is the big thing for me.
Other questions?
Have you put any thought? I mean, it's marketed as a free fair, but you're right. You mentioned a couple of events do have a cost.
Yes.
Has your board talked at all about increasing the price for those events?
We did.
And
We did this
yeah,
year.
mhm.
The Derby has always been $10 in the past. At the spring show, we raised it to 15, and we did for the fair this year as well. And we did that on the bull ride too. They've only been $10, and that is for everyone. Anybody, even if they have a child, they have to pay for their child. So we do have that in place, and that helps a lot. But yeah, we had to increase it this year to 15.
Thanks.
Any other questions for either of these community partners? Anything else you want to share with us?
Thank
Okay.
you for the donations you've given us in the past. We appreciate it. And come to the fair.
It's one of my lifelong favorite traditions. So
Us
I'll be
too,
there.
so.
Starting off with the pie eating contest. It's a special honor for commissioners and other county staff. So thank you for that. Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Mark.
I'm Peter Wren. I'm Chair of the Board, Extension Service, and I just wanted to say, I want to give a shout out to our staff. I've been associated with governmental officials for most of my adult life. I've represented the state of Kansas for 17 years, and I've never seen any hardworking, more dedicated, more competent people as a team than we've got in Extension Service.
I will actually echo that, because I say the same thing about the Douglas County Fair Board. I think they're the hardest working board, no offense, that this community has. And certainly the work that we do, the partnership that we have is wonderful and valuable. So I'll echo a little bit of gratitude. We really appreciate the support that we get from you in order to have the extension operation out on the fairgrounds. You will notice there is an additional $10,000 supplemental request. Whenever we cut our staff a couple of years ago, one of the things that we made the determination on was that we would stop paying for somebody else to come in and do janitorial services. So we appreciate your consideration of that request as well.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. See you later.
Looks like we're operating a little bit ahead of schedule and maybe not all of our partners are here for economic development conversations. I think we'll take a break and reconvene it when they're here. Good morning. All right, we are reconvened for our Wednesday morning. I keep thinking it's Tuesday. The holidays throw me off. Remember, we have a business meeting tonight. We've got one last bit of our budget hearings this morning, and we've got the chamber and EDC, Lawrence Chamber and EDC with us here with supplemental requests, as well as KU Innovation Park. So we'll go ahead and start with Lawrence Chamber. If you want to come forward and sit at these tables, pick your seat. We'll chat with y'all first. Morning. Morning. So we have a couple of supplemental requests, and I think we can just go ahead and jump into questions if that's all right. I'll pitch it over to fellow commissioners if either of you have questions you'd like to start off with.
So I have talked to Ryan and Steve a little bit about this, but I'd love to have sort of a public conversation about it for the. I'm interested in how this revolving loan fund works, who will manage it. If you could just kind of walk us through that and the public through how you see that working, and how that may be different than, will you be back next year for another 200,000 and another 200,000, another 200,000? I'm just interested to learn more about it.
Sure. Do I need to state my name? And yeah, sure. Ryan Rains with the Chamber and the EDC. So the revolving loan fund, right, from a sort of a zoomed out perspective, research 2015, 2016 done by the Brookings Institute has indicated that the reason that there are not more woman-owned businesses, that's the way the state's going to classify those as a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business. The reason that there are fewer of those today than there could be is because of a lack of access to capital, a lack of access to business networks that lead to business resources. So we think about PPP, EIDL loans, things like that, people didn't get access to during the pandemic. And then also business training for business growth, how to start businesses, how to grow businesses. And so those three pieces. So that was 2015, 2016, the Brookings study came out with that. The Brookings Institute came out with that through the Hawthorne Project. More recently, Dale Gines from the Federal Reserve Bank out of Kansas City has also stated that in the Mink states, so Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, those three things are an issue. So our effort in supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs, which in our community is persons of color, is to create better access to capital, better business networking for business resources, and also better training opportunities for people to start businesses, but then also understand how to grow their businesses. And so, so three pieces. So the training piece, network, and we're doing this in parallel. Network Kansas is a partner. I know you're familiar with Network Kansas, who provides gap financing. We work with Jill a lot through the Douglas County e-community. So they have, Network Kansas has a pilot program called Empower that they're doing around the state. And then they have board certified, because they're sort of, the research is showing this, right? And so they're doing better access to capital around the state with these pilot programs. For training, they have certified Kira Cherie's program, Entrepreneurial Business Basics. And so because they have certified that as a board certified program, we're leveraging that. So August will be our first one. We're paying for $10,000 of that. Network Kansas is paying $5,000 for that. It's available. And we're asking participants to put $100 down for their business to participate. We're covering 600 of the 700 in partnership with Network Kansas. So the night that Kira Cherie announced that, we had 3 people sign up that night, pay their deposits. So it's gotten good feedback. I will say the access to capital piece, how do we traverse that and how do we make that more readily available? And so as we've thought about it, revolving loan funds seem to make a lot of sense because with the revolving loan fund, the money goes into the bucket when loans are made. The money's in the bucket as loans are made. The money goes out to the participants, the applicants, the recipients, however you want to call it. And then as they repay their loan payments, the money goes back into the bucket. So then the money can go back out to more applicants. So it continues to evolve as long as people repay their payments. And so if you had a lot of loans go bad, obviously at that point, the revolving loan fund would disappear. But we trust that that's not going to be the case. Our Network Kansas gap financing loans, for example, for our Lawrence Metro E community, which is a pretty diverse portfolio in terms of who's gotten those gap financing loans. And those are for folks who can't access 100% of their capital through a traditional lender. All of those are up to date. So I think one business has gone out of business, but they've continued to make their loan payments. So 100%. So we trust that there are folks in the community with good ideas that will pay their bills. And if we give them better access to capital, they'll start more businesses and it will provide more financial support for them, which will help with our economic prosperity. And will give them better opportunities. So I should say this is also really leveraging a network, which we've been working for the last several months to build in partnership with Jill Jollicoeur from the county, and with KU Small Business Development Center, and with Kevin Kelly at Peasley Tech. And we're going to have the next event up at the Innovation Park tomorrow. And so, because we believed that while we could create a revolving loan fund, right, if we don't have a connected network, which is that business networking for business resources, a better connected network, then we're not sure that the product will actually get out to people that could use it. And so, that's kind of been the foundation of this, is getting that network established, which we've done, and it's continuing to grow. And then off of that, leveraging that network to say, hey, we're going to build this revolving loan fund. Hey, we're also going to offer these training programs. So that needed to be the first place. So sorry, I should have started there. Finally, I will say what we decided to do was work with the community to say, how does this revolving loan fund need to work? Right? Because it's one thing for Steve and I, and Steve's got a lot of experience with revolving loan funds at Commerce, the Department of Commerce. It's one thing for us to say, this is the way we could do it, or even look at Network Kansas and say, how are you doing it around the state? But it's something else to look at the people within our community and say, how do you need it to function in a way that can serve you to help? Because they are the ones, after all, that we're trying to serve. And so we have built a team that, again, leveraging that networking space, that has said they will come on as paid consultants that we can pay. To help us figure out the nuts and bolts of how the revolving loan fund functions, to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to build it for them, right? And then, and hope once it gets built, and they've sort of helped design it using Network Kansas's program as a reference point, but not necessarily copying it. Then it will be, something that can be used moving forward to help folks access capital.
Thank you, Ron. That's really good information. Bonnie Lowe with the Chamber and CEO. Commissioner, I think your question was, is this an ongoing request? Is that part of it as well? Because it is a loan fund, this is a, right. great. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and sorry, Steve and I have talked about this. It can be managed. Network Kansas has agreed to process the loans like they do the e-community loans. And so they will help us by processing the payments, receiving the payments. Yeah, doing the minute. Go ahead, Steve, sorry.
Green is important. Steve Kelly, Chamber EDC. And again, this has been an evolutionary process. You know, we set out to build the revolving loan fund because we felt there was definitely a need, but have learned a lot along the way and brought other partners in. And it's been kind of an iterative process, and we've tried to include others. And I think the path that we've gone down to this point has generated some momentum, and we're like our networking. We've had 2 of the networking meetings. Again, we have another one tomorrow evening, have had 25 and 30 people. And there has been different people at the table that have come. We've gotten good input. People seem to be excited about the opportunity. We've also found, and this has been something that we kind of suspected, but it's really been borne out in what we've learned in these actual sessions, is there are a large number of people, which won't be surprising probably, that really aren't aware of the resources that exist. They weren't aware of the Network Kansas programs. We were at Peasley and the crunch space, had never been in Peasley before. So I think it's been an educational process for both they and us to kind of learn what their needs are and what they're focused on and what they feel needs to happen. And also for us to expose them to resources that are in the community and they're available for them, but they just have not been in a position, didn't have knowledge, didn't have the connections to be aware of it. So it's been a real humbling and very much a learning process. Again, and it's seems a lot, but we started out to build a revolving loan fund, but we're building an ecosystem for the set of people, or trying to, with their involvement along the way, to get to the point of having folks who are networked, so they have access to resources, they have information, they have mentors and partners and other people who have walked the path that they can look to for guidance and for support. Recognizing the education and the educational resources are important. The class, which is going to start here in a month or so, will be the first attempt to do that. And they have 20 slots. We anticipate that it'll be full. And that will proceed for approximately 12 weeks. And at the end, you know, the goal will be a set of, and this is to be ongoing, is a set of folks who are networked, who have better skills than they did coming in, who then can be successful entrepreneurs, which then increases the viability of our loan fund long-term. And then we haven't mentioned, but that the Chamber EDC we also plan to put money into this. We've also made a request of the city for some support for this loan fund. And I've told other people, we have told other people, not just me, we're going to do this. The ability to do more, to have greater impact, is dependent on the resources that we have. But we are going to launch this program. We are in the process. We're doing the training. We're doing the networking. We are going to take resources from our Rising Together campaign on an ongoing basis to support it. But we're asking for some additional support from the county and from the city to help make this a stronger, more viable program that can have impact on more people.
Steve, Ryan, thank you so much for kind of the background on this. And I love to hear about the kind of educational aspects of people learning about what's available in our community, the resources that are already there at Peasley, at KU Innovation Park. I keep hearing about kind of Network Kansas and e-communities. And as we just wrapped up quite a few discussions about ARPA, you know that there is a plan to fund kind of a economic ecosystem mapping throughout the county. And we know that there are other kind of pockets of money. I hear you, Ryan. The research is very clear on this, that there is a huge access to capital issue for people of color. And I am 100% convinced that it's happening in our community. My question is more kind of administratively, does it make sense for this to be a revolving loan fund through the Chamber EDC? Does it make sense for us to kind of invest more in e-community? Why should we be putting county funds here for this project to solve this problem?
Yeah, Brian Reese from the Chamber and EDC. I think it's a great question. And I think one is we're the tip of the spear in economic development. And so when we talk about increasing the economic prosperity of Douglas County residents, that's us. And we're thinking about the whole of the county. So every person in the county. And I think, you know, it would have been easier just to put money into a loan fund. Said, let's make it a few points below prime, call it accessible. We built it, we're done with it. It's here. Come get it. And then if anybody said anything about access to capital, it would have been easy to point to that and say, well, we've done that. We built better access to capital. What we've done instead is honestly try to traverse ambiguity at times when folks have said, what's this going to look like? What's that going to look like? And in part, we haven't had all those answers because we're working with people in the community to figure out how can we make this work for them to help them start more businesses. And I think though this requires some level of trust, it also, you know, I don't know how to say this differently other than we've put in a lot of work trying to work with the community that we're trying to serve. And we're trying to do a better job of that. To me, funding this revolving loan fund and it being administered at the Chamber and the EDC is just a continuation of the work that we've been doing for the last, well, we built it into the Rising Together Capital campaign. We knew then we needed to create better access to capital. And what we've learned over time is, as Steve mentioned, this is bigger than just creating a product. And so to me, it feels like a continuation of what we've already been doing.
I think I might add again, Steve Kelly with the Chamber and EDC. I think we've tried also and have continued to expand the network or the bandwidth in terms of bringing other people into the mix. You know, we worked with the United Way. You know, we've had conversations with most of the organizations in the community. We've both been, and Ryan more so than I, active in the anti-poverty plank of the county health plan, and all that culminates here. And to us, you know, we are tasked with the role of economic development in Douglas County. And we think this is an important aspect of that has not had the attention that it needed. And I'd say took it on ourselves, but felt we had a responsibility to do this and to move this forward. And that's, as Ryan said, it's been built into our Rising Together campaign. It was one of the planks that this would be an initiative that we would undertake. And again, as Ryan has said very well, we could have just, you know, we could have accomplished some of what we, you know, well, not really fulfilling the mission. We could have in name done this by just putting together a loan fund and putting it out there for the market. But, you know, our intent is to have this to be something that's viable and that's valuable and creates value long-term. And so we've taken time and we've, you know, not shifted, but we've kind of diverted a little bit from our initial path as we've learned more and gotten more information and involved more people, because it's a path, it's a road that we're on, and it's not a race. We're, you know, we want to be making loans, but we want to make loans and be doing this in consort with the people who are our customers, the other service providers, so this can be a successful, viable, long-term operation.
And if I could add, Ryan from the Chamber of the EDC, if you look at the Douglas County Community Health Plan in poverty, we are an economic development agency within that plan that has made commitments to change the percentage of BIPOC owned businesses in our community, and to raise economic prosperity across the community. And these things are also built into that plan. And we've worked with Jill in that plan for 2 years. And that all of that has sort of funneled and created, I think, the momentum for how we've gotten as far as we have today.
I just wanted to build on Commissioner Portia's question a little bit. And we talk to us about what you see as a significant difference between this revolving loan fund that you intend to create and the two different e-community funds and the process? You know, I suppose what my question is trying to get at is, you know, have we seen over the years that there are folks that cannot access e-community funds because of some sort of traditional funding apparatus? Is there a gap that's there that you believe this revolving loan fund fundamentally fills, or do you see it as sort of a different version of the same tool?
I'll start and then turn it over to Ryan to kind of close. Steve Kelly of Lawrence Chamber and the EDC. We believe that there is a portion of the market that isn't served with the gap funding programs, the e-community programs. Those are done in consort with a bank loan. We feel that there are clients, customers, potential entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and existing small businesses that don't have the, and you know, I'll use the term bankability. Some people don't like that term, but don't have the bankability to actually get the traditional financing that would allow them to leverage that with the additional money from the Network Kansas program. Our intent is, and again, it's not built yet. It's going, you know, and we're doing this, build it with the customer process. But I think we see this as potentially being a loan fund that wouldn't require a match, that this could be the sole financing potentially. So those individuals that wouldn't qualify for an e-community loan because they don't have the other financing match could be clients. We also think that this, and again, this still is in development. We think that this could be probably for much smaller loans potentially than what you would traditionally see with the e-community product. They can be up to $45,000 loans. We've also been able to get some grant money patched in with some of those, but these could be much smaller loans for a different set of clients than what you would typically see in the e-community programs as they currently are set up and as the guidelines rule.
My last question, sorry, but Ryan, just to add on in case you have any thoughts, is will you be clear about what the extent of outreach, conversation, collaboration so far has been outside of Lawrence, with other chambers in the county, with other community partners or members? You know, you've mentioned some of the events that have happened recently, which I'm aware of. To the best of my ability, I think that they've all been in Lawrence so far. So can you just talk to me about what that countywide outreach and conversations have looked like?
Ryan Reeves with the Chamber of the EDC. I'm glad to do that. So we've worked with like the Chamber down in Baldwin. And so trying to work with those chambers to get the message out. These resources are available. I think I've sent the emails to Barack as well over in Eudora, and just trying to work as many angles as we can to get the message out to as many folks as we can. The meetings so far have been in Lawrence, and that's in part because of some of the feedback we got initially around where could we have the meetings that are the most accessible. And because of, like, the first one was the library, in part because there's the bus route and there's accessibility to that. And so we had the first one there. And then we went over to Peasley, which was just, you know, in Lawrence, which and now the next resource that we'll stop at is going to be the Innovation Park, which is tomorrow, and that's in Lawrence. And so I don't think in any way the meetings have to remain in Lawrence. Please don't hear that. That's just where we have initially been introducing folks to the resources, because that's where the resources have been based.
And Steve Kelly with Lawrence, the Chamber and EDC. I was going to mention that, which what Ryan just said towards the end. And part of this has been to get folks into some of those resource points within the community or within the county where those resources are available. And you know, the library was the first one because that was kind of an easy and a natural one. A lot of people are familiar with the library. Then Peasley, as you said, we're going to KUIP. We're going to continue to move them around. And we're not, you know, governed by geography. We're looking at points where we can get, especially in this first round of networking, get people exposure to some of these resources, because it's been not eye-opening to the extreme. I think it was maybe to be expected. it's very interesting to hear the comments and to talk to the folks who were there, who weren't aware of Peasley, what Peasley did, of the crunch space. And so we think it's important for people to get exposure to these resources that do exist and are available for them, that they, for a variety of reasons, have not had access to. So, you know, we have no problems with having something at the Baldwin Chamber, at the Eudora Chamber. We're just kind of working through the process, and we started with the library as kind of an easy first. Kevin offered the crunch space, which we thought was a good idea to give people exposure to it. KUIP, my thought is that probably the vast majority of the people that will be in attendance tomorrow night probably have never been at KUIP, don't even know it exists. And again, it may not be the type of entrepreneurship that will address some of their needs, but I think it's important to know where there are resources so that people who are aspiring entrepreneurs know that these resources are in the community, and in a lot of cases they don't at this point.
Just a couple of quick questions. The Network Kansas funds that are available, those aren't specific to women and BIPOC businesses, are they?
Brian Reese from the chamber. So our Lawrence Metro and Douglas County e-communities do not have funds that are specific. There is an Empower program that Network Kansas is piloting around the state, and they're coming out with some new programs that are more specific. And those haven't been, they've been talked about, but they haven't been made available yet.
And then,
and I should know, I think I'm trying to remember, just from memory, I'll put it this way, so don't quote me on this, but from memory, all of those programs will require a match from a public source, which is typically a bank or credit union.
thanks for that. And then this information, I mean, we have a Network Kansas person on EDC. The updates about this loan program, if we choose to fund it, would go through the EDC, and that would be a body that would be sort of monitoring how the program was going. And then the member of our commission could report back to the commission on how that's going. Is that how I'm just trying to get some of the details figured out for this.
Can you clarify a Network Kansas person on the EDC?
So we do have someone from e-communities that is a member of the EDC on that board. That, yeah, Bonnie's saying, yeah, that's what I remember, right? So I think if they're managing the fund, which I think is what I heard Steve said, they could report out on that fund regularly to EDC. And then our commissioner could report that back to here. I'm just trying to understand where the reporting mechanism is. And I just want to confirm lastly that this is a one-time ask, right? So, I mean, that's important as we think about budget, because we're trying to, you know, we can't commit to long-term things in future commissions. So I just trying to make sense of that. Okay.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we appreciate you all being here this morning. Thank you. Have a good day.
BTBC is on here if we have any other questions, but we are getting close to wrap up time. I don't know if anyone has any questions for Adam.
I don't personally. Other commissioners?
Oh, yeah, this is Commissioner Portillo. Adam, thank you for joining us today. I see that the request is specifically around like funds that would potentially be used as match funds, something that you didn't have in the past year. I know that KU Innovation Park has gotten quite a bit of funding in the past year. Have there been any matches that you've missed out on because of the decrease in funding?
There's not. And Adam Courtney, sorry, KU Innovation Park. Sorry, I can't be there in person today. There hasn't been thus far, but we've always tried to take all of the funds that we get from our stakeholder partners, the city and the county and the university, and leverage those as many times as we can. Just starting this year, we've had the EDA Build to Scale grant come in, and it's a dollar for dollar match at about $500,000 per year. And so you can see that takes the majority of those funds. And so we're out looking for additional funding, and we've just gotten notification that we're getting a NIH IRED grant, which will require match funding as well. And so we're going to be leveraged pretty significantly moving forward. Thankfully that grant doesn't start until next year. But all of these dollars are important for our ability to go out and raise additional grant funding.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Adam, this is Commissioner Kelly, and I'm just going through all your budget documents here, and somehow they're not adding up for me as I try to figure them out. So I see that your 2023 request amount is for 250,000. And then we also have a supplemental request to replace that 50,000. So I'm just trying to, it was funded at 200,000. It was a cut last year of 100 to 150,000.
So
Is there two supplemental requests there, or are we
No.
merging some together?
they've lumped together their incentive funding
Thank you.
in that amount,
Okay.
which we.
And then
have-
there's also, sorry, Sarah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, there's also a $75,000 request on an annual basis for a 5-year period that was used to match state funding that we leveraged to get the EDA funding for the phase 3 project. And so that's that 75, the 25 for the city county incentive fund on top of the 150 is how you get to 250.
Yeah, if you look under page 15 of the line item budget,
Right.
I think you can see how we've broken it out into different lines. But I think Adam combined it. Do I have that right, Cammy? Yeah, which is fine.
Okay. I just see our supplemental as being, our supplemental request is 50,000. Right. Okay. So Adam, I read in the packet, and having served on what was the BTBC board, I know it's important to have support from governmental agencies, especially leveraging those funds. How do you decide what the right number is to ask us? Work us back through your budget, and how do you say like 200,000 is the right number? How do you know that that's the right number?
It's been a historic number, and at first it was based on being a sustainable entity. And now we've kind of morphed into, our business resources and our real estate. Our real estate rents support the real estate mix. And then we really look at this funding as the business resource and the resources that we're able to provide small companies and startups with business services that are really vital to those companies to get them started and growing and supplement their needs. A lot of these are researchers who don't have a lot of business background and should really be focused on the research as well. And so it's just been enough to sustain that business support, which we provide for free to those companies. And so if we were to erode some of that public funding, we would have less funding to support those resources, and then less funding to leverage to get the additional support that we're getting at the federal level to support the business resources as well.
So I guess just to follow up on Commissioner Kelly's point, this is Commissioner Portillo, how, and this is something that we've talked about as a board, like how do you plan on transitioning as you're moving from kind of this startup, which is what K Innovation Park was, to now we're in phase 3, we're already talking about phase 4, phase 5. So it sounds like what you're saying is no matter where you're at, you're going to be asking us to continue this same level of historic funding, regardless of how many assets and external funding the park brings in. Or is there?
I don't know that. Yeah, I mean, I think the plan is to become more sustainable. Right now, we have EDA funding for phase 3, but we've also leveraged financing to back that financially. And so, the real estate sustains the real estate at this point, and we're not at a point where it's generating the revenue to support the business services as well. And so, and as we currently look at the budget over the next couple of years, that we just don't have the funding to reduce that public support that we have now. As we look at phase 4, and depending on how we capitalize that, we're out looking for funding at the state level. We've got some initial funding from BASE at the state level to do some engineering and architecture work there. And so if we can capitalize phase 4 and phase 5 with some of those funds, then that'll put us in a lot better position to become sustainable, because we won't have to finance the other part of that real estate development. So it'll be a mixture of if we're able to get some of that sustainable funding, that one-time grant funding that will fill the gap for real estate development. If we were to have to pivot and go out and either find a developer or to get leverage financing through a bank loan again, then it would probably reduce our ability to transition to that sustainable aspect. So without knowing what phase 4 and 5 look like at this point, it's hard to project what our timeline is to veer towards a sustainable model at this point. Did that answer your question?
Sure.
Adam, just to confirm, so the BTBC commitment, the BTBC phase 3 commitment, did you say 5 years or 10?
It's 5.
So is that, and that started in what year?
I think 2023 would be year 4.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Adam? Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
thanks for joining us, Adam. Have a good day. Anything else for the good of the order? Well, actually, I have one more thing for the good of the order. Commissioners, I see on our schedule for this week that Friday is set as a deliberations day. I would like to propose that we cancel that day. If there's no objection, we just begin deliberations on Monday so that we've got the weekend to work through. I'm seeing head nods. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that works for staff. What we can talk about tomorrow is just when we will get worksheets back, if we could get them back earlier. And then I'd also want to talk about them, depending on what time those get back, what time you want to start on Monday morning.
Okay.
Because if I don't get them in until Monday morning at 8, it takes us a little while to put everything together. So we can
I
talk
saw the
about that.
request for a deadline of Sunday evening submitting them, which I'm good with.
Are
So
you guys good with that? Okay. And we can still
Totally good
talk
with
about what
Sunday
time to
evening.
start on Monday.
Oh, I just said totally good with Sunday evening. I had a couple questions about the worksheet, but I can.
Sure. Okay.
I'm not sure mine is either, but
Uh-oh.
we'll figure
Okay.
that out.
We'll resend the worksheet. All right.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good rest of your day. We're adjourned until our 5:30 business meeting today.